If you love to travel, you are going to need a travel agent. And if you want the best travel agent, you are going to need Boullies Travel. Boullies Travel can help you with any kind of holiday wherever you want to go in the world, taking care of every last detail. From package holidays through to fully customized itineraries where you are completely in control of where you go and what you do. And the best part, there are no charges whatsoever. Rated excellent on Trustpilot. Start your next adventure right now by going to bouliestravel.com.
Welcome back to episode 3, part 2, where we are discovering food across Japan. Let's jump right back in.
Okay, so back on the food then.
Yes.
So kind of street food. Yeah, no, all the all the countries in that direction, they tend to have an amazing kind of street foods. So what's the street food scene like with Japan?
The best in the world, I'd say. I mean, I'm gonna get some arguments from places like South America and places across Europe as well. But I personally think that street food is amazing. Actually, also Southeast Asia as well. It's really, really good options. Yeah. But I mean, personally speaking, I would say that Japan has some dynamite street food options. Now, there are a couple of different ways that people can experience street food in Japan. So you've kind of got the ones that are going to be available all year round, and these are going to be served from these carts that you find called yatai. Now, yatai are these kind of portable carts that you move around, and then you can get all sorts of different foods from these street vendors. Things like, let's see, so there's takoyaki, which is like octopus balls, which are really good. They're essentially like a small kind of piece of octopus that's then placed inside a batter, and then kind of more like a donut kind of batter, and then kind of cooked up so it takes a spherical shape, and then kind of put like all sorts of different like toppings on, like onions and dashi and maybe even a little bit of Worcester sauce as well for good measure. Things like yakisoba, and then like meats on sticks, and fried chicken as well, but different from the Family Mart fried chicken that I mentioned before. There's a very Japanese type of fried chicken called karaage, which is it's a fried chicken piece essentially, but it's so good, and the way that they create it as well is amazing. So usually the traditional way of making karaage is sort of piercing the chicken and then letting it sort of sit in sake, so Japanese rice wine, so that it gets infused, and then covering it in a very light batter and then deep frying it there and then. So it's really succulent and delicious and very different from the fried chicken that you would get in the UK. So you can get all of this on the street from these yatai sellers, and there's certain places that are quite famous for their street food offering. Fukuoka, that I mentioned, that had the really good ramen, also has a really good street food scene where you've got actually a number of these yatais kind of dotted along the river. So you can just sort of pop in, sit down at one of their benches, have some beer, have whatever they're serving, whether that's gyoza, the dumplings, whether that's some takoyaki, whether it's some noodles. And there's kind of a community atmosphere. So as soon as you kind of go underneath their little roof and sit down, then you're sitting side by side with the other patrons, and people are drinking and having fun, and there's smoke rising, and there's sort of a boisterous community element to having a meal in one of these places. So yeah, sort of having that as one of your nights in Japan will be unforgettable. It's such a nice experience.
Fantastic. Let's look now at different regions then to do with food.
Yep.
It's obviously spread out because there's a lot of different areas. We talked before about how some are more modern, some are really set back. So kind of what can you tell us about then the regional differences on the food going across Japan?
So every region likes to have its thing, I would say, in Japan. So every region is going to specialize with a certain type of thing. And this is largely because of kind of bringing people to that region, but also bringing people from Japan to that region as well. So during the summer, like during particular holiday times in Japan, like Golden Week or Silver Week, where there's like a series of bank holidays where people like to take some time off, the Japanese love to explore their own country. and for good reason. And food is a really big one for that. So, some places that immediately come to mind are places in Kagawa, which is really famous for its udon, which is like a type of noodle, but quite a bit thicker and a bit chewier, and some really good broth.
I love
Um,
udon.
Oh,
Love it.
udon's fab. Yeah, but go to Shikoku for udon. Then I mentioned about having the ramen in Fukuoka as well, which is really well known for that. Some personal favorites are in Kochi, which is where I lived for 3 years. Now, Kochi is really famous for its katsuo, which is essentially a type of tuna, and it is cooked, but very very briefly. So you get these kind of cutlets of this katsuo that's then essentially kind of put on a stick and then kind of very, very quickly cooked over this huge, intense flame that's created from hay. So they kind of like get all this hay up, kind of
Wow.
burn it all up, create this huge flame, and then sort of sear the tuna very, very quickly. So it's kind of like nearly burnt, not burnt, but nearly burnt on the outside, but still raw in the inside. And they serve that with raw garlic, and kind of a little bit of spring onion, and it is phenomenal. It is so good. I wasn't able to go to Kochi on my recent visit last week. However, they did have some Kochi style katsuo in one of the izakayas that I was able to visit, which was a delightful surprise. So I had my fill of katsuo there. Um, there's also regional differences in dishes. So I mentioned about okonomiyaki before, that confusing Japanese pancake. There are two different styles to okonomiyaki, and I recommend trying both of them. You've got the Kansai style, which you can find in Kyoto and Osaka, which is essentially the meal that I mentioned before, but without noodles. And then you've got Hiroshima style, which is where they add the noodles. So essentially, it's that same mixture, that same sort of batter put with all the ingredients. But then they add noodles in there as well and sort of churn it up. And then they lay it out flat, and then that's what you eat. So you've got the Hiroshima style, and then you've got the Osaka style, Kyoto style, Kansai style. So actually, sort of seeing those regional differences between what you can have. There's also a very specific, distinct Kyoto style, which is different from the Kansai style, which I found on my most recent visit of to try okonomiyaki, which is more of a what's the name of that? It's a pizza that you fold. Calzone. A
Yep.
calzone. It's like a calzone okonomiyaki. So you've got that pancake mixture, but then it's cooked and then folded in half with all the toppings on top, which I haven't seen before. And I mean, the classics are going to be Kansai and Hiroshima style. So I feel like this is just another variation to make Kyoto a little bit more distinct. So I think every different region is going to specialize in a certain type of food, which is another reason to not spend all your time in one place in Japan. Get out, see as much of it as
Absolutely.
possible, and try your fill.
Yeah. So, Osaka, is it known as a nation's kitchen?
It is. Well, it's known as Japan's kitchen, and that's largely. So I mentioned about we've talked about the street food being very sort of popular in places like Fukuoka, but it is really, really well known in Osaka. So there's going to be lots of places where people can try street food in Osaka, and just the variety of differences and spices and like levels of flavors that you can find in Osaka is going to be really, really well different from everywhere else in Japan. So I think if there's yeah, I think it's the okonomiyaki that people have got to try in Osaka, more than anywhere else. So if you're looking to try that dish, wait until you get to Osaka to try it because it is really, really good. Also, for those with dietary requirements, when on my last visit to Osaka back in the summer, I was able to find a vegan, gluten-free okonomiyaki place, which was run by seemingly one woman. I think she might have been in her 20s, and she was running around like a mad person, serving everybody and cooking at the same time. And it was a
Wow.
three-story building that looked. It was a very sort of like artistic, a bit up, had like a bohemian style. You sort of go in, queue up, and then there's this one person behind the counter taking orders. Usually it's just variations of okonomiyaki. So it's not, so hopefully nothing too much out of our wheelhouse. She would take the orders for 5 or 6 people, then put up a sign behind her saying, back in 10 minutes, just cooking. She would then rush to the kitchen, make those orders, put them on the side, ring the bell, and then go back to taking more orders. And everything else was self-serve. So you would sort of take your tray up, take it upstairs, then you would have to bring your tray back down, bust it yourself, and you could pour your own drinks. They had a self-service drinking area, but it was just run by this one person that was so entrepreneurial. So on top of having amazing dietary requirement options, she was an inspiration. I think about that place quite a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, wow, that sounds insane. So looking at the kind of the uniqueness of the Japanese food, although I feel that entire thing has been about the uniqueness of Japanese food, kind of how important is the ritual of the presentation of food in Japan over just the taste?
I think the way that everything is presented is, I'd say, kind of as important as the flavor, the textures, everything like that. So actually the kind of eating experience, seeing the food and seeing how it's presented is such an important element. And this really rings true of, particularly with kaiseki, which I mentioned before, where you can sit down, you've got lots of different varieties. If you go to a traditional inn, a ryokan, and then that's your meal, and everything's kind of laid out for you, it will look immaculate. And again, touching in on those seasonal elements. So even the cutlery and the bowls might have kind of seasonal touches to it. So the bowl might have autumn leaves, like the koyo, kind of decorated around it. Things like that it's really crucial. And then if you go to the kaiten sushi places that I mentioned before, the rotating sushi belt, then you can actually see, usually there's an island in the middle where the chefs are preparing the sushi and cutting everything up, and you get to see them actually putting everything perfectly. So all of the different sushi parts look and feel the same. There's not going to be a bad quality piece of sushi that ends up on that belt. Everything's going to be cut to the correct proportions and look immaculate. And that's part of the training. And this is why it takes such a long time for these masters, these culinary masters in Japan, to reach that level of perfection, because it's not just about the taste and how it fills you up. It's not even about the nutrition that you're getting from the food, which is going to be amazing, but it's about how it's presented, because that is an important element of the eating experience in Japan. So some of the best looking food I've ever eaten has been over that way as a result.
Best looking. Like that. Have you ever tried a cookery class out there?
I have, yes. And that's something really special. I think there's a noodle making class that I've tried in actually in the Alps in Takayama, which is an amazing experience, because there's a few different ways that you can kind of get involved with cooking, but the more fun ones, I would say, are sort of built around tradition. So noodle making is really good fun, but there's also the essentially it's the way that the noodles are prepared, but they kind of put them in these slides, almost these kind of bamboo slides. So they're kind of slipping down once they've been made, kind of like, I think, cool them down, which you then catch with your bowl. So there's an element of fun there. But, sort of actually making the noodles from hand and actually speaking to the people that have been making them for generations, is such an amazing insight into just the difference and the uniqueness of those kind of recipes. I mean, speaking to someone that's been making noodles in a family for generations, it could be like 3 or 4 generations of making this one type of noodle. If you ask them, well, how do I make takoyaki? They'd be like, well, I don't know. I don't know how you make takoyaki. I know how to make noodles. My life is noodles, and I perfected that. So actually sort of seeing the difference between that is really cool. And, if you get the chance to have a go at making mochi, which is it's a Japanese dessert made with bean paste, that's a really cool way, because they use that with a big hammer. And there's usually 2 people that get involved. So you've got one person with the dough in this bowl that then has to fold it. And then the other person has got this massive mallet. They sort of like whack down on the dough. So the 2 people need to be pretty in sync. So it's sort of like folding it, whack, folding it, whack, folding it, whack, which is really good fun. I mean, if anybody's trying that for the first time, I'd probably recommend being the person with the hammer, just so that you come back with all of your fingers intact. But that's a really cool experience too.
That sounds like a great YouTube video, that does.
It's
Watching somebody doing
it's
that.
amazing. It's and actually seeing people that have been doing it for years is really therapeutic as well because they'll sort of like yell out, okay, go, obviously Japanese, and then you just sort of see them really in sync, and making mochi like kings.
Yeah. There's something to do with food in Japan that blows my mind every single time I hear it. And I'm going to say it out now to you, and I'm just not going to believe it. But there's a Christmas tradition in Japan, isn't there?
There is.
And it's just, what is this Christmas tradition?
So I mean, you've got to give hats off, I think, to the Colonel for this one, really. But there's a Christmas tradition which is to eat KFC. So not the KFC that I might have discussed in the past, which is Korean fried chicken, which is my favorite, but yeah, the Colonel's Kentucky fried chicken, and it's a tradition in Japan to have a family Christmas box of KFC on Christmas Day. And it's been going strong for years and years and years. Again, I think this is potentially someone might have seen an image of people in the West, whether that's people in the UK tucking into turkey on Christmas Day, or maybe even shots of people tucking into a Thanksgiving dinner in the US. But essentially, they saw this huge bird, and then they had chicken available, and then the Colonel jumped onto the marketing and then promoted it as a Christmas tradition. So I've had Japanese friends come over to me and be like, "Oh yeah, so what are you doing for Christmas? Are you going to do the KFC?" And be like, "Well, no, we don't do that so much here. We have turkey." But they was like, "Oh right, because yeah, we get a Christmas box from KFC every year." And you need to be quick as well. Those Christmas boxes sell out, so they have to book them really far in advance. It's not quite a boneless banquet that you might get over here. It is slightly more tailored with a Christmas kind of twist against it. But it's it's something that still remains strong to this day. Again, if anybody's feeling a little bit picky eater, they don't particularly want to eat a lot of sushi there. If they're going around Christmas, then it's perfectly acceptable to have a cultural experience by eating KFC on Christmas Day. So you're not losing out on anything.
I find it insane. They have such a heritage of food, and Christmas Day is a KFC. Yeah, blows my mind. Anyway, so practical helps. No, I'll start again. Practical and helpful tips. For those with dietary restrictions, we've already discussed that people need to really flag this up in advance because it really changes the type of experience we would organise for them and book for them, and where they're going to go and how we're going to do things. So is it widely available, lots of eating options across Japan, or not so much?
I'd say it's getting better. It's definitely getting better. I think the understanding of vegan diets and gluten-free diets and vegetarian diets are becoming widely more and more available in Japan. I still say that it's not without its challenges. So sort of letting kind of like us know right off the bat about dietary requirements is really crucial, just so that can be then kind of essentially added to the fabric of your trip, so that if you're planning to go to Japan and you've got a dietary requirement, then there's going to be lots of things to eat just outside of just so that you're not stuck with eating white rice and glasses of water. There's going to be lots of variety that you can eat in Japan, but letting us know in advance so we can tailor make that experience is really, really crucial. I mean, thinking about the limits that Japan has with certain DR, so dietary requirements. I mean, we've talked about the ryokan stays. We've talked about how many of them are going to be family owned. And we've also talked about those generations making that one dish. And that all sort of falls into place with dietary requirements. So if you've got a family that's been running an accommodation in the mountains for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 generations, and the meals that they prepare and serve to their guests have been perfected over all of those generations. So the meal that you're being presented with now is the pinnacle of what they would like to serve to you. And because it's the pinnacle of what they serve to you, changes to that meal on request by the guests isn't something that's going to be always taken with a smile. In fact, it might be a flat out, well, no.
No.
This this meal for tonight was signed off 30 years ago. We're not going to make this change, even if it's taking out, meat or alcohol or anything like that. So some of those more traditional experiences, if you don't have DR, are going to be an insane experience. It's going to be such a good addition. However, if you do have those DR, I mean, we've been working with accommodations in Japan for a quarter of a century. So there are alternatives, and there are those more flexible traditional in-stays that can cater to vegans, that can cater to vegetarians, that can cater to celiac. So letting us know early on so that we can structure that around your trip is crucial.
Yeah. I think you explained that really well. It's not because of arrogance or lack of ability. It's just because it's just been a way of life for such a long time, and they work so hard to do that specific food.
Exactly.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, exactly. That's they almost sort of they're just confused, I think, more than anything about sort of like, well, okay, the center point around this is fish. So if we take out the fish, then
there's nothing.
There's nothing. Or there's everything sort of, we're talking about presentation before. So like everything sort of like highlighting and indicating going towards the main dish or something like that. So if you take out that, it's sort of you're signposting in a culinary way to a dead end, and to be like, well, we're not doing that.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. So on to etiquette.
Yes.
And different ways around the world. And I think we spoke previously about an old advert that I saw of HSBC with the eels coming through and those types of things, which I just loved. I think it's so funny. But what's the common mistakes that you should kind of avoid, or how do you manage that etiquette journey?
I think for the most part, if you're visiting from the West, then you will be forgiven from certain social faux pas. I think there's certain etiquettes that you might just not be familiar with, and then if you do those, then you're not going to be deported. You're not going to be told off. It'll be fine. Someone might tell you the correct process if they're feeling quite bold, but largely you will be forgiven. So, like for listeners that are planning their first trips to Japan, please don't worry too much. I mean, there are a few things that can kind of get you off to the right start that I can talk about. So, particularly around eating. So eating in public has certain limitations. So you would never eat on the street, and you would never eat when you're walking down the street specifically. So that's something that you never see anyone from Japan doing. And this also extends to public transport as well. So if you've got, let's say, a rice bowl like an onigiri, and you're sitting on the bus, you would not eat that on the bus or the subway. So that's a bit of a hard and fast rule. You'd find the correct place to eat those dishes so you wouldn't eat while you're walking. This rule is lifted on the bullet train, and that's on public transport. That's pretty much the only place that you can eat in public on those kind of public transports. And that's quite a common thing to do. So if you've got let's say a bullet train going over lunchtime, let's say it departs at 11, kind of gets in at 3. What most people do is to buy a bento, kind of like a Japanese lunchbox, but they would buy it from the station. Now, station in Japanese is eki, and then obviously bento, but they kind of combine the two. So you would buy an eki station, eki bento, so station lunchbox. And that's something that you can then eat on the bullet train, which is perfectly fine and acceptable and encouraged. However, everywhere else, take it as a bit of a rule, don't eat in public unless other Japanese people are doing it. It's probably a good rule of thumb. In terms of dining as well, a couple of things. So kind of the most common way to eat your food in Japan is with chopsticks. Now, with chopsticks, then if you go to maybe other places, other destinations that widely use chopsticks, and maybe the quality of the chopsticks isn't going to be great. So you generally tend to kind of split them in two. But if the quality isn't great, then you might be left with splinters at the top. And what most people do with those splinters is they take the chopsticks and then just kind of like bash them against each other, get the splinters off. Do not do this in Japan, because it is shown as being very rude to the restaurant or the host, because you're basically saying that you have bought inferior chopsticks that splinter on pulling them apart. So it is a bit of a sign of respect to pull them apart, but not do this kind of splinter removal, because chances are they won't have splinters because they are going to be of quite good standard.
Yeah.
The last one as well, which is always good to mention, is if you're eating rice and you're taking a break from the rice, then putting your chopsticks down to the side by side. Usually there's a little spot where you can put them, but just on the side of the bowl is usually the better way to do it. Do not put your chopsticks directly into the rice and have them pointing up when you're sort of going from meal to meal. This is a big faux pas, because that is used predominantly at funerals. So you'll see in Japan in funerals, you'll see a bowl of rice, white rice, with 2 chopsticks sticking out into the top of them as part of the ceremony. So doing this in a restaurant is incredibly rude, because it's got that funeral connotation to it. So yeah, I think those are the 3 points that I think are really good to know when eating out in Japan. But like I say, if you do make any mistakes, then chances are you'll be forgiven. So don't stress too much.
Yeah, some really good points there. We have discussed budget a little bit, but is it, kind of cheap to eat everywhere in Japan with food, or how's that work?
I would say that for the most part, yes, it is incredibly affordable to eat out in Japan. Like I say about the sushi costing £15, which was wild. Bowls of ramen are going to be really cost effective. Okonomiyaki that I mentioned is also going to be quite a cheap dish, but at the same time really good. I wouldn't say everywhere though. There's going to be certain meals where you can splash out a bit more, especially in the larger cities like Tokyo and Kyoto. And different varieties of quality that you can pay extra for as well. So I mentioned briefly about yakiniku, which is Japanese barbecue that you can find. And the place that I used to go all the time in Kochi, where I used to live, was really cheap. So you could get this huge plate of meat that you could then grill yourself for just a few pounds. The beers cost maybe £1 or £2. It was really cheap, but the most recent one that I went to in Kyoto was more premium. So you had like Wagyu beef, where that was a bit more expensive. I mean, the quality of the meat is really what you're paying for at that point, especially with Wagyu in terms of like the very delicate marbling and things like that. And actually having Wagyu in certain places of Japan, you can rack up quite a healthy bill. But for the most part, especially if you're looking to try those regional flavors, it is very affordable. And at the moment, the yen, well, the pound is very strong against the yen. So yeah, now's the time to go.
Save a fortune on food.
Exactly, save even more money.
Yeah. So let's take a look at some of your memorable moments. I'm sure there's tons you could talk about. But what's your, let's say, one most unforgettable food experience you've had in Japan?
So this is one that it was a little bit tougher to find, but it was me and my wife and 2 friends decided to take a weekend away to go to Beppu, which is famous for its hot springs. More in western Japan. It's actually on Kyushu, one of the southern islands. And we did essentially a trip from Shikoku, where we used to live, and we took the ferry over. So we had three nights to kind of go check out the onsens, the hot springs, that sort of thing. But the big focal point of that trip was trying a very particular delicacy, which I had been wanting to try since I saw it first, I think, in this quite an early Simpsons episode. So it was something that I had in my mind to try for 25 years, but that was fugu. Which is Japanese blowfish, which I think Homer tries and thinks that he's going to die, because fugu is, if prepared incorrectly, incredibly poisonous. So I mentioned the masters in terms of training to cut and prepare all the dishes in Japan, which is not exclusive to one dish, but the fugu masters do spend a few extra years with their training aprons on, just to make sure that they're preparing the correct cuts of the fugu. So we traveled all this way and sat down, and we had a kind of set menu where you've got lots of different varieties of fugu that you could eat. So you've got like some sashimi, you've got some sushi, you've got little bits that are cooked. You even had a very small piece of their fin sitting in the sake that's prepared as a side dish as well. So everything's kind of utilized and used. It was delicious and absolutely worth it. My only grievance behind that is that they added a very, very small amount of chili. So which kind of like sat on the tongue just for that extra bit longer. So I was convinced that I'd eaten one of the bad areas
bits.
of the
Yeah.
dodgy bits of the fugu. So
Yeah.
I was convinced that this was my last meal for about an hour after because of that chili, just because I didn't know it was there. So it had that sort of tingly feeling.
But they did
Was
that
it
on
worth it
purpose,
though?
didn't they?
Even with that risk? Absolutely. Yeah. Do it again in a heartbeat.
Fantastic. If listeners, excuse me, if listeners could only try one single dish during the experience, what would you recommend?
Oof, I mean, this is tough. And I would say, I mean, again, this isn't going to be great for those with dietary requirements, but yakiniku is a firm favorite just because it's the whole process behind it. Because you are served, you kind of choose between a variety of different plates of raw meats, essentially. And then you've got the barbecue directly in front of you. You've got this huge extractor fan that comes down. It's smoky, it's loud. The drinks are flowing, and then you get to grill your own meat. So you've kind of got these little choppers, and you could put the meat on and grill it to your heart's content, dipping it in the various sauces with a bowl of white rice on the side. If I could only have one meal for the rest of my life, or one restaurant option, it would be
That would be
yakiniku,
it.
hands down, and I wouldn't regret the rest of my life. I'd be very, very happy. So yeah, having Japanese barbecue is it's definitely, and it will always be top of my list.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely amazing. Food is such an important and essential part of the Japanese journey, and getting it right is really key. We've talked about it again. Getting the right information kind of before you go and planning that trip out is absolutely essential. So we are both here. We would love to help you plan your next trip out, or your first trip out to Japan, with all of this insider knowledge that we kind of have and built up over the years, and take the time to perfect your trip exactly as you want it, into all the things that are unique and important to you, which is what traveling the world is all about ultimately. It certainly is for me anyway. So please feel free to get in contact. You can find us on social medias. Head to our website, bouliestravel.com. And we just cannot wait to get started on building your perfect Japanese adventure. So thank you very much, and that's bye from me. And thank you, Charlie, and we'll see you again very, very soon on experiences in Japan next.
Very exciting. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Perfect. Thank you, Charlie. Bye now.
Cheers.